Ryan, welcome to In Layman's Term with Nohra. What we do, the title kind of speaks for itself. We take what we think are complex issues out there that people like you and me who are wonkish, get into, but the rest of the world doesn't necessarily have the time, the energy. They're too busy living their lives and raising their children and taking their kids to soccer and paying their taxes and watching sports that they don't have time. So hopefully, I can come in and just really help them understanding what's happening in our world. And what you're doing is crucial to what's happening right now. Your background, I've looked at it. It's fascinating work. I can't wait. This will be a very open conversation. I don't have specific questions because that's not how I like to roll. I like to have you go, and I'll interject here and there every once in a while. So I'm going to turn it to you. First of all, anything you want to tell me about when you grew up, all the inflection points that make you decide where you are today, of course, starting the Students for Trump. And my one question is, you started a movement before you can buy a beer, and that's very impressive. So you go from
Yeah,
there.
yeah. No, it's funny enough, I get asked this question a lot, but whenever I did start this, I mean, I come from a family, middle class family. We're originally from Jersey, moved down here before 9/11. My mother was there in the 93 bombing. She worked in Seven World Trade. My family wasn't really political. And people always ask me, they're like, you must have came from a family that had a political background, somebody have run for office, but none of that was the case. I always knew during each time we'd have an election cycle, whether it be Bush, whether it be Mitt Romney, John McCain, they were vocal at the dinner table, but it wasn't something that transcended that. I was always told we don't talk religion or politics with the public or with friends, and we keep it inside. Clearly, that is totally off the table now. That's talked about all across the board, whether it be at family dinners, whether it be at work or school or college. It's happening everywhere. So for me, it was initially, I was skeptical when it came to Donald Trump in 2015. I knew him as the, you're fired guy on The Apprentice. I've known him for his entrepreneurial stuff, really inspiring guy. And I thought to myself initially, like, is he really serious about this? And then what really struck me was watching him. There was a live streamed feed of when he spoke at one of the classrooms in New Hampshire, at their University of New Hampshire. And he had probably about 100, 150 people in the room. And they were college students. You had some people there from around the community, and he resonated with them. I mean, you're already talking to a group, where you got the caucuses, you got Iowa caucuses, and these people are hard to convince. This is a pretty serious state. If you get their support, it's great to have. And so when he was giving these speeches, you saw people clapping and almost everything they said. And he said it in a way where it wasn't rudimentary, but they understood it. He spoke to them as if he himself was the average common man, which, is not the case whatsoever. But he understood some of their problems, some of what they were going through. And he also understood that a lot of what they say and what they feel is not being represented in Washington, D.C. And that was the key takeaway, is that he knew how to message. He wasn't a suit in Washington. Even though he does come from corporate America and the entertainment world, he still understood the struggles of everyday American blue collar workers across this country. And so to me, looking at who we had of the 17 contenders, Donald Trump was the guy to get the job done. Fast forward to now, when I started Students for Trump, we had no clue what we were doing. Neither did the Trump campaign. And so we were all working together to sort of figure out what was the best symbiotic relationship we could have, how we could work in this environment, get the message out there. Because if one thing that I learned from Charlie Kirk is that he was so good, at going to the young person and making it known that their voice matters. Even that they don't think it, but what they're thinking, how they feel, their concerns, they all matter. And they have a spot here in this moment in time to be vocal, to be loud, because if we're not, that's when we allow things to tacitly happen, like what we saw in the 4 years of Joe Biden with mass immigration into the country, trade wars that screwed over America, the wars overseas with Ukraine, with Israel, which Trump has been great at handling and getting the motion moved on. But all of these things matter. And to me, that is one of the biggest key takeaways about Donald Trump that differs him from all of these other candidates, all these other politicians, is he doesn't talk down to you, he talks with you. And that is one of the best ways to get the youth vote, as we saw here in the last election, going to Twitch, going directly to the young people, going to where they get their source of information and targeting them that way. And that was a very effective strategy that got us historic numbers with young people this time around. And it eventually got us into the White House for a second term. So, I think one of the biggest things, and you can cut me off here because I know that I'm going into it. But I mean, look at all the accomplishments that Donald Trump has gotten done here in less than a year, right? I mean, look at everything that we've done. We've stopped these wars, no more foreign wars. We're taking on the cartels directly head on. We're not going, we already know what they got on those boats. When people say, oh, it's just fishermen, you think we don't have intelligence? We can't look on a satellite to see what they're loading and unloading from these boats? We know what's going on those boats. We know they're drug trafficking. They're not going out there to get some flounder or some spotted fish. They're going out there to deliver key ingredients that help create the drugs that kill millions of Americans every single year in this country. And that, to me, hits close to home. I know people who are addicted. I know people who have been addicted to heroin, to fentanyl. And it is not an easy thing. Their withdrawals are horrible. Their cravings are horrible. Their lives are turned upside down. Families are destroyed. It doesn't just affect one person, it affects the entire family unit. And it really hurts to see that people don't care more about this issue in the United States. You should care what's coming through the borders, whether it be China, with it coming through our ports up in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania with fentanyl, or whether it be through South America, bringing their ingredients right up through Mexico and the southern border. Those are two areas of concern. And this president is the first one here in modern history that's tackling it in the way he's done. And we're actually seeing results from it. So I tell everybody, look at this more than what the media is spewing off to you. Look at the results, because that's what matters at the end of the day for a commander in chief, anyone who is leading the mantle, running this country. I want results. I don't care about mean tweets, which unfortunately we don't get too many of those anymore. I care about the results. I love the videos of declassified footage of those boats getting blown out of the water, because I know that that just saved potentially my next door neighbor. And
Uh-huh.
that's
Uh-huh.
what people have to look at. And I'm so glad that Trump met with the Chinese President Xi today, because we just secured a commitment for China to control what is leaving their ports when it comes to fentanyl and these key ingredients to make these drugs killing Americans. We're handling what's going on in the southern border, and now we're also handling what's coming on through our ports from China.
The demand. So I'm just going to quickly say to our audience, New Hampshire is the first election that takes place in the United States. So when someone speaks there, it's a traditional thing we've had in the United States. That's what people do. But God, you touched on so many things. We talked about the outcomes, and I want to talk more about the outcomes. But I want to really focus on you and your organization and how you've evolved since 2016 when you saw this and became interested, and where you are today, and then of course where you want to go in the future, and how does that influence people that are watching us today, which is people are beginning to pay attention. People are not the reason why your interview with me is so important is because people after 4 years kind of thought, wow, I don't think open borders are good. I don't know if it's good that people, get money. Illegal immigrants get resources that our own people don't get. Um, it's not okay to have a bunch of wars going on all over the world. I was embarrassed about the way the Afghanistan withdrawal happened, and my president didn't know what was going on half of the time. So people are paying attention. So how do we take what you're doing and explain it so that they start even paying more attention and hopefully kind of, join your movement?
Yeah, I mean, if we want to get into the minutia of how this all started for me, I was a freshman at Campbell University. I created a Twitter account once I was convinced Donald Trump was the guy who would be the next president of the United States, the 45th president, and probably the only person who could have beaten Hillary Clinton at that given moment in time. And we prevailed. But that didn't come without, struggle. Obviously, it was bumps along the way. We had to learn new things. We had to try different strategies. For the most part, it was volunteer. So, traveling across America and, having to figure out different ways to target young people was really the conception of what we're seeing right now. I mean, Turning
Were
Point
you
USA
were you
was,
involved were you involved in the campaign, with the campaign?
yes, we were helping with
Yes.
them. Yes.
Okay, so you were, okay.
And so one of the biggest things or the biggest hurdles to get over with all of this is how do you message to a younger generation that consumes media? 75% of it, 18 to 35, get it from Snapchat, they get it from headlines in their feed or something that their friend says. How do we get into that audience? And so in 2016, that was the biggest learning piece. We definitely, won that election with, there wasn't really anything solidified. It was a lot of it came down to people were tired of the status quo. People were tired of what was going on in the United States, the forgotten man and woman, all of those mantras that made up sort of all of the politics we've been dealing with and accepting as a country for generations. That was a slap in the face to that status quo. Looking at what happened in 2024 was astronomically different. People like Alex Brucewitz, X Strategies, myself, all of these different young people coming into the fold and saying, hey, we've got this strategy down, but if we want to get the young people, we need to start going to the people that they listen to. Who is that? Be Theo Vaughn, be people like Shane Gillis. It'd be people like the Nelk Boys, right? Or Old Row. Cultural center points that make up sort of what young people are diving into and divulging into in terms of content. And that was one of the best things he could have done, especially when Elon Musk purchased X. It made it where instead of censorship of conservative ideas, those conservative ideas are welcomed. So it really was about the timing, but it was also about how we were delivering the messaging. That was very, very critical here. And I know Barron Trump, he has to be mentioned as well because he was a big piece in crafting that and getting an interview with Theo Vaughn and making that stuff happen. Um, but looking at how Students for Trump came to be, it was an idea. Um, at the time, there was Turning Point was very new to the scene. I think they were created in like maybe 2013, around then, 14, and they were at CPAC conferences. We ran into them. They were just getting their feet wet in all of this as well, and they turned into be a multi-million-dollar machine that was able to go on college campuses with Charlie, people like Candace Owens, myself, Benny Johnson, Brandon Tatum, all of
Sure.
these different voices. And by doing so, motivated young people. And it's still happening to this day where we have so many young voices that are rising up through the ranks. They're gaining following, they're gaining traction. People like Brillin Holland, who's down in Alabama, coming onto college campuses, speaking to students, and breaking down these subjects, sort of like what we're doing right now, to make it understandable without all of the political BS, I call it, that's involved in it, that just confuses the voter into submission. Because that's really what happens. People don't understand a lot of these average terms politicians have used for years, but they'll vote that way anyway. And that's how the
Exactly.
Democrats have been so good at getting their party just lock and key every single election cycle because they believe this stuff. And then you really have these conversations, and then they start thinking, well, do I really believe this? Did I really even understand what they were saying to begin with? But we've mastered that strategy of turning things into memes, making things relatable. The White House's strategy has been phenomenal. I don't know, you've probably seen some of the content coming
All the
out where they're
time.
meming things. My good friend Billy McLaughlin, who previously worked at the NRA as their spokesperson and digital director, him with the help of Kalen Dorr spearheaded this effort at the White House in this second term to change the way that messaging happened. So now you have the White House accounts interacting with GameStop, right? The console wars is over. The Halo players. These are things that young people hook onto and they love. And just like how Obama was one of I think he was the first president to use Twitter and to message via Twitter. Well, that's old news now because now we know how to message via memes, message via the culture, and get into that demographic in ways that no other president has done before. And I would argue politician has done before. So Trump has done that effectively, and I think this is obviously going to change the entire, tarmac, the entire space for how politics is done. People are going to have to catch up. They're going to have to change their strategy. It's going to have to involve this because this is what people love to see, and it's very effective.
Yep. So I'll say two things. One of my guests was somebody who was an executive in mainstream media with Fox, and we had a long conversation about how the news used to be catered and how the news is actually today being taken by the young people. Back then, you trusted Walter Cronkite or Dan Rather to tell you what's happening, and you took what they said and you took it for granted, and that's how you got your news. And the media's job was to make sure behind the scenes they got you the best possible perception of what's actually occurring. Uh, Today, people look at those kind of figures, and to the young people, they're not real. It's not someone who's real. They want someone who is maybe not as sophisticated and wearing a tie and on
Mm,
the main channel. They want somebody young or somebody old who's authentic. They want
right.
authenticity. And I think that's what you caught on. And by the way, humans want authenticity. I ran for governor, and most people who would meet me would say, "Gosh, we love that you're a businessman, but you're also an authentic person." So I don't
Yeah.
know how we as a country made our politicians become this caricature of fake. And you're right. President Trump is the opposite of that. What you see is what you get. What he tell you is going to do is what he's going to do. So I mean, to me, that was like a big thing. How people consume the information. The
Well, it
second
became
thing,
so much easier with the internet, guy. I
yeah,
mean, instead of how news traveled, not within the 24/7 or, news cycle that we have now, things were fact checked differently. Now things spread like wildfire, and people are able to call out politicians on their BS in real time. And when your
yeah.
feed is full of that, then you just start to group them all together, like the lying people who are spineless who get elected, power of incumbency, stay in office their entire lives, make a career out of it, but never really deliver.
So I'll ask you the question again. I love this conversation, and I apologize if it's everywhere, but there's a method to my madness. So one of the biggest problems we had, I worked on the president's campaign in Nevada, and I got to speak before every one of these rallies and so on. But one of the biggest problems is get out the vote.
Mm.
Uh, and that's just well known. And of course, the Democrats always have an advantage because they have unions and they mobilize and so on and so forth. How do you mobilize? How do you get the young people out to vote? Because they're humans, and on Tuesday they're doing. If it snows, they might not want to go. So how do you do that?
Yeah, Turning Point has a very effective strategy with this, having the Super Saturdays, to get out the vote. You bring out some awesome speakers who young people want to hear from. They talk about the candidate, they talk about the mission, what's going on in America, how we can fix it, how we can involve them to fix it. And then after following, the speeches, we go door knocking right away. We'll have some snacks, some food, some water, and we went out on the trail. We did this in 2024. We did this in 2020, and it was very effective for getting people out there. But the reality is that it's a 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 strategy. GOP sucked at it before Trump. They'd have all these coalitions like Latinos, Republican Latino groups, or blacks for the GOP, or whatever the case may be. But you only see or hear from those guys 4 to 5 months from the election, right? So the marketing strategy, being involved all the time around the clock, not just when you need their vote, is very critical. But getting people out, we've been telling influencers this all the time. It's great to get the likes, it's great to get the clicks. That's one thing. But using your platform to not only engage but to motivate and inspire and mobilize is one of the biggest things that you do, and we try to do that all the time. Even though I'm taking sort of a hiatus right now and not on the road as much, I'm still pushing content from Turning Point USA, talking about events, right, that's happening up in New Jersey for this election coming up here very soon on the 4th. And they've got Jack Posobiec going out there, Cliff Maloney, a huge amount of conservative activists and speakers and supporters that are going to these events, and motivating and inspiring those people to go to the polls, because we can flip New Jersey, and the likelihood is growing every single day. And that's like I said, my home state, so it's close to home in that sense that we want to bring it back to red, because we've seen what good that can bring. And I think really too, it comes down to everything we just said, talking about messaging, strategy, relatability, and then also the inspirational part of that with getting those people out to the polls, and why it matters that their voice matters.
Okay. And to me, the secret that you have is that you're actually and by the way, I also was involved with the TPUSA. I spoke at their big rally in Vegas last year as well. So the secret that you have is you found a way to speak to the young people and actually convince them, uh, despite the fact that they have been indoctrinated from first grade on, to convince them that there is there is a way to be conservative and be okay with it, and it's also good for the country. So, tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think in 2016, one of the initial reactions that I did get on the college campus was you had a lot of closeted conservatives because they were afraid to come out and support Donald Trump because of how the left reacts towards that. And what people have seen time and time again, if there's a scenario where we had a, you know, college Republican who's wearing a MAGA hat get attacked, we're going to back that person up. You're not alone in this. If something like that happens on a college campus, we're going to come full fire in supporting you and making it known. So whatever spiritual mutant decided, that day that they're going to attack somebody or disparage them because they support one candidate over the other, well, get in line. That's not America, right? And we live in a country where it should be a bastion, especially a college campus, a bastion of free ideas, free debate, and discussion. They shouldn't be indoctrination camps. And that's the core messaging that we've been pushing, we've been promoting. We've been successful at a lot of universities where professors have been fired. They've been asked to resign because of how they're treating conservative students, how they're treating Turning Point chapters, how they're reacting in the midst of Charlie Kirk getting assassinated. Which one of the things that was very interesting to me, Guy, was that among almost all the people, that we went after, where with their dirty messaging, with the promotion of hate against Charlie's family, against his supporters when he was assassinated, the vilification of him. We went after some of those people. And the majority of the people we went after were like social workers, they were professors, K through 12 teachers. These are the people in front of the malleable minds of society that are teaching our kids. You have to call that out. At this point, it is my civic duty to call that out because it's not acceptable. This is not how education should be run. Hence why the Board of Education, has been gutted in the way it has, because it has been allowing this to go on for so long and indoctrinate kids for so long. There was once a point where education was education. You learned about your math, 1 + 1 = 2. You learned how to read, write, spell. Now it's just gone way out of control. And I think many Americans agree with me on that. And we just have to keep calling this stuff out as we see it. And for that young person out there that still may feel like they don't feel comfortable wearing the MAGA hat, wear the MAGA hat today, because I guarantee you're going to see a lot more people than you did 10 years ago that would have given you a thumbs up. They're going to give you a thumbs up. There's a lot of people, even when I wear mine through the airport, people who I would have thought never would have said anything pro Trump are giving me a thumbs up or saying thank you for wearing the hat and being, brave enough to go out there and do it. You can't create change without being brave and courageous. And that's what we have to do. We cannot be silent, because when we're silent, they win.
Absolutely. Just so you know, I repost every time you expose someone, on because I think it's very important that we actually do that. There should be consequences, to people's what you say, how you say it, when you say it. There should be consequences on both sides.
Right.
If you and I say something stupid today, then I think we should be, caught, and I need to apologize if I do it, because that's
Yeah.
that's how that's how society should function, rather than just saying things that are just, like how that side did, especially post assassination. It was awful, uh, the way they were acting. But so, again, jumping again. So tell me about your organization and you specifically, 6 months before the election, where you were and where are you going to go 6 months from now? Because you told me where we've been the last 6 months. So I'm just curious how your mind is working, where you want to go, what are the things to fill, To me, that'd be fascinating for our people to listen and hear that.
Yeah, no, I mean, we were on the college campuses. We were in different cities, different towns. I mean, I was probably on 3 or 4 flights a week before the election, especially in the 2 to 3 months right before it. Looking at the next 6 months, I took a few months off, not initially because we kept having all these wins when Trump got back in the first 100 days. It was hard to step away from that as much as, the girlfriend was saying, you really need to take a break. And so eventually back in August, I decided, I'm going to take a little bit of a hiatus to the end of the year. And obviously, Charlie's assassination brought me kind of halfway back in the door with media and talking about the subject, as uncomfortable as it is, but it does need to be talked about because he was one of the inspirations behind why I even created Students for Trump to begin with, was Charlie, and his guidance, his leadership, his inspiration really made me the person I am today, and I wouldn't be where I'm at, anywhere near where I'm at, if it wasn't for him. And so, looking at the next 6 months, it's going to be a lot more of stuff like what we're doing right now, a lot more podcasts, a lot more media, talking about the accomplishments of Donald Trump, breaking it down, giving that word out to everyone, no matter what your race ideology is, putting that information out there so you understand it, you see what we're doing, break through the noise, break through the fake news media that we've been dealing with, and focus really on the midterms. That's going to be really, really critical. We're going to have to hit the ground running. If not so right this second, by January, the end of January, we need people on the ground going out there. So we're going to be mobilizing for that as well. Certainly in some of these critical states where we're going to need on the ground action, getting out the vote. And I'm going to be helping Turning Point with that as well, helping some candidates, and hopefully continuing, God willing, to motivate and inspire and mobilize this next generation of freedom fighters in this country who are going to help carry on this messaging even beyond Trump, because it is no one singular man. This is a movement.
Yeah.
And we need to be focused on midterms, and we need to be looking ahead at what 2028 is going to look like. If it's going to be JD Vance, if it's going to be Rubio, I think we're setting them up for a very solid victory if we keep going down this path. And we keep solving, some of these core problems we have with common sense solutions, which is what we've been asking the government to do for a very long time. But instead of common sense, we just like to throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks in the most convoluted, confusing way possible for the American voter.
Yeah.
And so just God willing that we're able to continue to do this work and continue to fight and continue to make America greater than it's ever been before. The fight is just beginning.
Yes. Speaking of the midterms, I'm in the same place. I'm from Nevada, and we're doing a little bit of the president being the genius showman that he is, floated the idea of a midterm convention. So
Mm,
we're trying to get it
yeah,
to come to our state because we are a purple state, and we can handle it. Vegas can handle it with our eyes closed. The Super Bowl was smooth.
yeah.
So we're hoping to, so we started working on that already, just to make sure that it comes to our state. And I think that would be a good kick because it's going to, again, here's the political genius. Why do we have them every 4 years? Why not? Get the troops as excited. There's always this saying, in midterm elections, nobody shows up or people don't care or what, well, why not do
Yeah.
it in a midterm election? So again,
I agree with that. I mean, it should be happening. And I always thought that myself, because every time I've been to one of those, I leave more fired up than when I went in. And I always
exactly.
leave with what I like to think is a higher IQ because I learned so much, not just
Yes.
about the people, but the policies and where people are trying to steer the party. So I think they are critical. I think we should consider it a pulse check where everybody's at. So I 100% agree with that. That's one of the smartest things I've heard come from the party in a minute. So
Yeah.
I'm full support of that.
And of course, it came from the top because that's he's the genius when it comes to this show business. I mean, it's incredible.
Right.
Um, so let's talk about Gen Z. You're the future, and to me, as a immigrant, legal, who came to this country, lived the American dream, and want nothing more than to give back and make that possibility available for everybody. How, what's Gen Z thinking and where are they? And then how do I help them as a now, older person?
One of the biggest things, and I always loved Charlie for this, is, and I consider I was born in 95, December of 95. So I'm like in the middle there. I consider myself a millennial, but people argue with me. But no, Gen Z is more conservative than even millennials were or are, right? And you got to look at it, they're getting information on the dime every single second of the day if they choose to even open their phone, right? They're not going to newspapers. They're not really watching Fox News unless there's like a special segment with some special guest. So they're consuming information entirely differently, like we said before, and they're turning out to be more conservative, which is key and critical. Now, what Charlie always did, and I saw a perfect example of this in one of his college campus tours, where you had an older guy who's the father of this younger kid, and they both saw differently on the topics of socialism or communism. The younger person relying mainly off of information that AOC or Bernie Sanders type would be pushing forward, and then you have, this older gentleman who was his father who saw this as totally in a different light, especially with the way media was consumed, back in maybe the 60s, 70s, 80s. And so that generation has either lived it, they've seen it, they've, breathed it before. And so they're going to have a different perspective. And one of the biggest takeaways that Charlie, if I remember it correctly, try to see each other's perspective based on the time and period that you consume that information or live. And that's one of the biggest things that the older generation can help with is, instead of looking at necessarily how you consumed it, try to understand how this younger generation is looking at it and what may affect that, right? It could be the fact of the matter that most young people, the average age that they're able to buy a house now, I think is around 40 or 41. So, and that was obviously much different in the 60s, right? The average age back then may have been 22 or 23. So the times are different. The times have changed. A lot of things are more expensive, not affordable. And so you can thank inflation for that. You can thank Joe Biden for that. But that's sort of the way that I try to explain it to some of the people who ask me from the older generations. Look at it how they're living now and try to compare that to look back to when you were a kid or when you were graduating college or high school and the prospects of a job back then, or the cost of a house or the cost of a vehicle, the cost of gas, and try to compare the two. And not necessarily, and I even say this to the younger generation, not necessarily getting mad at one another, but having an understanding of times have changed and we have to adapt. And with that adaptation, we need to change. Sorry, my dog is acting up. Reagan,
No problem.
sit down, sir.
I love the name.
That happens occasionally.
I love the
Um,
name.
yeah. After one of my favorite presidents in the history of this country.
Same.
Uh, but yeah, so I mean that's kind of the 410 on it is adaptability and changing, sort of how this stuff works.
Okay, so that's so when I speak, it's exactly what you're saying. I try to tell the younger generation, hang in there. We're gonna make it so that you can have an American dream. Today's administration, people like me that are working with them and so on. But also, I say the same thing to legal immigrants that are coming into this country that or have been here in this country, which is, it's if you do it the right way, this dream is still going to be available to you. And I think that's something. But what you said is crucial, which is let me think the way they thought, the way they're thinking now. They're 23, 24. COVID and people always say COVID did it. I don't say COVID did it. People who were in charge during COVID destroyed their lives, whether it's public
Yeah,
health or politicians. Okay, I never go with oh yeah, that was just COVID. No, it wasn't COVID. It was you guys and the way you treated COVID. So so COVID took a big chunk of people's this generation's social life, their development, and then of course inflation, which somehow they try to convince all of us that by passing a humongous bill, spending bill, that's going to you know decrease inflation. Do they think we're stupid? Do they think none of us studied economics 101? And it was all of
right.
these kind of things. But the the biggest weight was on that generation. It was on young people. And I think we need to give young people hope. And I'm in New York today, And remember, for every time that you and I speak about, getting someone on our side to understand what a great country it is, what the opportunities are, there's somebody on the extreme left saying it's broken, we need to fix it, and the solution is socialism. So there's a little bit of a battle for the soul of our youth, and somehow again your work is crucial, and I the more you can tell me about what you guys are doing, the more it's going to help me feel better, because I feel like it's an existential issue that we have.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean it's a lot of work, but it's a battle worth fighting. It's worth being involved in because, we are ultimately helping the future generations of young people in this country. And all hands on deck is how I look at it. I could be doing something else with my life, but honestly, there's nothing rather that I would rather be doing than doing this. I feel like we're doing something crucial every single day that's benefiting millions of people, and I'm just grateful that we have this opportunity. I'm grateful we have so many amazing people involved in it that also share the same views. And I'm just humbled and blessed for all the opportunities I've been given, all the opportunities I've been given or given to other people as well, and the support that we receive. Millions of Americans back us and support what we're doing, and so we're gonna keep pushing ahead, and we're gonna keep nailing it out, hashing it out, and getting the job done.
And if you can tell me your take on the movement, I remember when I was speaking before the president spoke. I'm the kind of person who, like, when I finish my speech, I walk around and I just meet people. And the movement, which you were referring to me, consists of all ages, all races, all socioeconomic backgrounds. I felt like I was at the county fair when I was at these rallies. I didn't feel like I was at a political rally, and just having that
Right.
amazing group coming together. When you go to Amfest and so on, even these kind of events. So how do we keep that going? Because I think the movement right now is unstoppable. If we
Yeah.
keep doing what you're doing, I mean, you're much more important. I'm, you're up there in the front.
Yeah, no. After this, I will unfortunately have to jump. I do have another appointment, but I will say with this, if we keep having the events, if you build it, they will come, right? Field of Dreams. You build it, they will come. People are hungry for this. The fact that this is so much different than some of your traditional political events, political rallies, where it feels like a rock concert as opposed to being a lecture hall, people are going to love that naturally. Like you said, Donald Trump's rallies feel like a rock concert. It feels like an entertainment venue. You got the guy showing up to UFC fights. He's doing side quests in life, essentially. He's having fun with it. And that is what obviously Gen Z, Gen X, millennials are starting to really love, to see a president that is not afraid to get out there, not afraid to have some fun, have some laughs, while also making the country safer, securer by securing our borders, creating fair trade that benefits the American instead of stomping them down. These are things that are helpful. And, if you can have fun doing it, why not? Why do we have to be so serious? Why do politicians have to be liars and spineless people? You can change all of that. And I think that we're the vehicle making it happen. And seeing the energy, the excitement, all of that, seeing the conversations that are had even after some of these events, I know that we're doing the right thing. And I know that we're forever changing the political atmosphere and fabric in this country.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you said you were in a rush, so but I just want to say, where are you based?
In North Carolina, but I'm between West Palm and Washington, D.C. all the time.
Okay,
So
so I have I
anywhere you
have a
need me.
I have a board meeting every once in a while in North Carolina. I want to buy you a beer now that you're of age of drinking, and I want to catch up with you some more. Okay?
Yeah, that sounds good with me, Guy. It was great to meet you and great to be on your show.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and keep up the good fight. God bless.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye bye.